I'd like to call to order the Plan and Zone Commission meeting for the City of Davenport on today, October 17th, 2017. Would like to welcome everybody to the meeting. One note, I'd like to make sure everybody has their cell phones turned off because what I'm told, the audio could interfere with our recording and your voicemail might end up on our recording. It appears as though we have no public hearing tonight, correct, Matt? No items, so we will move directly into our regular meeting agenda. Roll call, please.
Connell.
Here.
Hepner.
Here.
Ingram.
Present.
Kelling.
Here.
Lammers.
Here.
Manus.
Here.
Martinez. Med.
Here.
Quinn.
Here.
Reinhartz.
Here.
Tallman here. We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Report of City Council activity.
Nothing more to report.
Secretary's report.
Second.
The Secretary's report has been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It will stand as written. Report of comprehensive plan. Anything, Matt?
Just staff will be meeting with our consultant to go page by page, word by word through the code first few days in November. I mean, we won't be finishing it, but we want to get it in presentable format for the first public consumption of the first draft of probably at least 3. So
Great.
looking
Look forward to it.
Pardon me?
I look forward to it. And
Yeah.
Good luck. Zoning activity. Looks like the old business still remains tabled. We will move on to new business. Commissioner Connell.
Mr. Chairman, before I will be abstaining from this case.
Thank you, Commissioner Tallman. Commissioner Connell.
Case number REZ 17-09, request of Michael R. Leap, Sr. to rezone 13.465 acres MOL of property located at the southeast corner of Eastern Avenue and 53rd Street from C1 Neighborhood Commercial District to C2 General Commercial District, 8th Ward. Find my place here. Staff recommends the Commission accept the findings and forward case number REZ 17-09 to the City Council for approval, along with the 9 listed conditions, and I so move.
Second.
Case number REZ 17-09 has been moved and seconded for discussion. Matt?
Real quickly, Matt Flynn, Community Planning and Economic Development Department. Just a couple updates from the public hearing. One was, again, trying to nail down the exact size of the development. And again, we had started off with a larger area and we're able to scale it back. So, and I believe the exhibits in your packet are correct, but I did not update the PowerPoint. Essentially, the area to be rezoned will align with the center line of Spring Street extended south. So this area will actually stay in R5M. You can see the zoning there. Possible consideration of development at a later time there. Again, there's nothing proposed there. Since the meeting, we've had some meetings with both the developer and our engineering staff to make sure that while we don't know exactly what this development may look like, that we're in a position to address the any traffic concerns that will come up at that time, and we've reached a mutual agreement in terms of how those conditions would be structured at this time. It does recognize that they are doing a traffic study on their own. As you know, we're looking at doing a major improvement and expansion of 53rd Street. It may be possible with I'll say a new 53rd Street profile that we might be able to adjust some of the conditions that were brought up. So basically, here's our findings, that the rezoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan. I know some commissioners asked, well, what's changed since 1999? I think, first of all, I think that was an excellent question, but we have now Toyota the Toyota dealership to the west, and if anything, there's been a continued, I'll say, transition of this area from an agricultural corridor. I like to tell the story. The 53rd Street used to be a cut through from Bettendorf to West Davenport. Depending how late I was to see my girlfriend at the time, was now my wife. But anyway, so it's gone from agricultural to kind of a mixed use, and now it's clearly turning commercial. And the comp plan that shows this as commercial corridor, I think it reinforces that. And again, we have spent a lot of time with the conditions. We use the 1999 conditions kind of as a baseline and work from there. And I think we've reached an agreement on something that we can all live with. So here are the conditions. I can go through those if you have any specific questions. And again, I think generally speaking, if you even include most of the neighborhood, they seem to be, I'll say, okay with what's proposed. And I think the conditions that we have will help mitigate any potential impacts, and as well the conditions, particularly under 4, address the traffic concerns. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Matt. Commissioner Hefner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt, I was curious about condition 9A, where it states automobile and service and oil change facilities not part of an automobile dealership. Am I reading that wrong, or just can you clarify that for me?
And maybe a language a little, clumsy. I'll take credit for that. But if you go back to the 99 conditions, there was a prohibition for not only automobile service centers, but also dealerships. And we're just saying now that these standalones, and we'll drop some names like Jiffy and Amco Transmission, places like that, they can go on the property, but they're limited to the northern 300 feet, which is roughly the northern half of the development. So potentially there would be less impactful uses between those types of uses that front 53rd Street versus the residential to the south.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
Commissioner Kelling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt, in the original conditions in 1999, in the provisions for the turning lane, acceleration, deceleration lanes, whatever, there was language that said that those would have to be constructed prior to any construction on the facility itself. Now those are absent from the conditions today. Should they not be added? Should that language not be added again?
Well, I think that's the expectation now. What makes it maybe a little bit interesting is the pending 53rd Street, 53rd Street construction schedule. But I think given your question, we wouldn't object to including that language, again with the understanding that either the conditions can be amended at a later time to reflect any construction and design schedules for the 53rd Street, or we can just work from that. So I guess to answer your question, we wouldn't object to including that language.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that that language be added to paragraph 4, subsection A, B, and C.
Okay, we have a motion to add conditions regarding the turn lanes to section 4, and it has been seconded. Any discussion regarding that? Commissioner Manus?
Not on that. I'm sorry.
Well, thank you. Any additional discussion? All in favor of adding those conditions signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Appears as though it's overwhelming to add those conditions. Any additional discussion? Commissioner Manus. Hold on just a second, Commissioner Manus. Scott, did you have anything else you wanted to? I didn't know if you were 100% done or.
I think I'm done, but maybe I could just raise this question, hopefully doesn't sound too stupid. In paragraph D, under 4, there's language about reconsideration of the degree of access control to this property. What does that mean? What does access control to that property mean?
That would that be in kind of a multi-encompassing, including the location of driveways, the widths of driveways, the need for and/or length of both left turn lanes for westbound traffic and right deceleration lanes. Could include signalization, but again, I think we don't anticipate any other signals for driveways other than at the Spring Street location, which would be servicing more property than this.
Okay, so it pretty much speaks to traffic flow rather than additional access points to the parcel?
I wouldn't 100% rule out that there would be additional driveways going into the property. I would say the chances of additional driveways are extremely low, though.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. Commissioner Manus.
Thank you. I wanted to go back to that number 9 that Commissioner Hepner asked about. I'm a little confused. I know that there are a number of car dealerships or different manufacturers that will be involved here, but I did not think that this use was going to include what sounds like a leased facility for a quick service oil change. I didn't think that was going to be part of this, which seems to be contemplated by 9A.
Again, those are just, I'll say, orphaned from that original agreement. It would require the owner of the property, which we assume will be Gurley Leap, of all the property, to sell or lease property to an independent operator providing the same service as the dealership. So I don't think that's very likely, but we're just saying in the event that that may occur, that it would be located only on the northern, roughly half of the property.
I'm wondering, would there be a change in the whole plan to create that? Perhaps this sounds like we're contemplating that happening, and I certainly didn't anticipate that use.
No, and again, I would think that if it hadn't been in the 99 agreement, it wouldn't be in the conditions here at all.
And I was trying to also think what kind of a drive-through window might be contemplated.
I suppose it's whatever fast food restaurants that aren't on 53rd Street or Elmore already, but so that would be more, drive-through banks and fast food restaurants would be the other, and I'd say that's probably more likely than other automotive-related uses.
I don't have a magic rewrite for this, but I'm just wondering if there could be a more generic statement that additional commercial uses not covered in the original plan shall be no closer than 300 feet from the south property line, or something like that. I'm looking for comments from others here. Do you think that is something that
Well, I think,
is important to bring
and
up?
again, this is difficult because we don't have a plan to react to.
Right.
If we had a plan, conditions would be a lot more straightforward. But if, for example, Spring Street would extend south of 53rd Street, either as a private drive or a cul-de-sac, or possibly even another east-west street somehow. There is potential that, I'll say, less impactful commercial uses such as office buildings, clinics, and the like could be located in the southern part of the property. So I guess I would see that would be less of an issue than having an auto service center in back there, which I think is probably, is another possibility.
Well, I don't have any magic language, so I guess I'll withdraw my concern here and stick with the staff language. Thank you.
Okay. If I could just clarify real quickly, if you go back to those 99 conditions, I didn't dwell on it in the staff report, but there were a couple other uses that were named as outright prohibitions. One was a movie theater. I think in 99, what was then Showcase Cinemas and now is the Rave Complex was probably looking at moving, and they didn't have a site yet. So I think that was the reason why that was called out. And it was also called out adult uses or adult entertainment. Even in 99, that would not be permissible in this location. I think it was just, to be honest, probably put in there to relieve some people's concerns about that kind of use. But when you look at the limits, I don't have it memorized, is it 1,000 feet separation from residential and a bunch of other uses? It makes it extremely limited where those types of uses can operate in the city of Davenport. Most of those areas are actually north of I-80. So we took that language out as well.
Thank you, Matt. Any additional questions of the commissioners? Commissioner Lammers.
Have we in the past changed the zoning without seeing a site plan for what's going to go on that land?
It's just we've become accustomed to using the PUD and PDD tool, and we had discussed that briefly with the developer. But I would say without really any details, that I think the conditions at this point work as well as any kind of plan development.
Right, thank you.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Epner,
Yes.
Kelling,
Yes.
Lammers,
Yes.
Manus,
Yes.
Mid,
Yes.
Quinn,
Yes.
Reinertz,
Yes.
Tallman, abstain. And Connell, yes. Motion passes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Tallman, if you could read the second zoning issue petition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Case number REZ 17-10, request of Women in Spiritual Hope Ministries, Inc. to rezone 7,841 square feet, more or less, of property located at 5210 North Division Street from R4 Moderate Density Dwelling District to CO Office Shop District. Staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission forward case REZ 17-10 to the City Council with recommendation for approval subject to the following 3 conditions, and I would so move.
Second.
Case number REZ 17-10 has been moved and seconded for discussion. Ryan?
Ryan Rusnak, Community Planning, Economic Development. Property is currently zoned R4. They initially requested the CO Office Shop District to allow the property to be utilized as a faith-based transitional house. through correspondence, indicated that stay expected to be 1 year, residents be 18 or older, include residents from the Illinois and Iowa side. They're not, people aren't placed there through the Iowa courts or anything like that, so it's not considered a correctional placement facility. Petitioner requested the CO office shop district because the adjacent zoning was that, and that would allow for a rooming house or boarding house, which have multiple people living in one room, usually two people living in one room, but overall a common living area. We researched a bit of the history of the property, and in 1980, the Zoning Board of Adjustment granted a special use permit to allow the construction of a two-family dwelling at this property. I think previously we had been under the impression that it was single-family residence, or in fact had been kind of internal configurations had made it back into a single-family residence. But there is a zoning right for a two-family home, and why that's important is because if you have a two-family home and a zoning right for that, it could allow for up to 10 unrelated persons living in that unit, five in one unit, five in the other. I thought that was important to point out. What happened, I believe, is, and this had quite of an interesting case, the adjacent property and this property, but apparently they were constructing this house as a single-family resident, kind of made steps during the construction process to make it a duplex, and then they subsequently went to the Zoning Board of Adjustment for approval. Looked at the case history, too, of the adjacent property that's zoned CO. Interestingly enough, staff had recommended denial of that. This Plan and Zoning Commission also recommended denial. Ultimately, it was approved by the City Council. And so, in the staff report, it noted that really didn't have commercial zoning on the west side of North Division Street. The commercial zoning ended on the east side of Division Street, and you really didn't have that level of commercial development over there at any rate. I think those are some of the questions that we had last time. But nevertheless, the CO zoning was introduced to the west side of the street. Considering that the long-range plan, the future land use map, designates this property as residential general, staff did feel that a higher level of intensity use and zoning class was appropriate here beyond R4. However, considering that the property is designated residential general, it's staff's opinion that R5M, which is a multifamily zoning that would allow the use, would be more appropriate in this location. Notices were sent to property owners within 200 feet. We do have one formal letter of objection. There was a neighborhood meeting. Two property owners, adjacent property owners, came to it. One appeared to be okay with the request. And asked that a stockade fence be installed. That's one of staff's recommendation. One neighbor strenuously objected. That same neighbor, one of those neighbors spoke at the October 3rd Plan and Zoning Commission, and the neighbor who had submitted the formal objection also was present. I wanted to bring up that it's staff's opinion you need to be careful about getting too far into the use. I know that they've been very forthcoming with what the proposed use is, but you generally need to be careful with, are we rezoning something to allow certain types of people to be living in this type of unit? What we'd rather see and recommend is that you look at the appropriateness of the zoning and is the zoning consistent and compatible with the area. So our findings, the abutting property to the north introduced a higher level of intensity on the west side of North Division Street, and because of the residential classification, a higher intensity residential classification would be compatible. And we had 3 conditions. The property be zoned to R5M, which is a medium density dwelling district. Again, allows the petitioner to have a rooming house or boarding house. I thought it was important to at least state in the conditions about the limitations that are caused by off-street parking, and that would seem to be more of a limitation on the number of dwelling units that you could actually have in this property, and that a 6-foot high stockade fence be installed to enclose the rear of the property. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ryan. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Lammers?
Can you help me understand if the zoning as it currently stands would meet the needs of the petitioners? as a duplex versus changing the zoning
Good question.
things?
So what it was, there is a zoning right to allow it to be a two-family home. And what that means is there's a fire separation between those units. You could have a door or something like that, but it would need some fire rating to separate those two units. When I looked at the assessor data, it lists the property as a single-family residence. I did speak with the petitioner's representative that indicated that there was access between the units. It's my understanding of how the home would function that you wouldn't want to completely have, for instance, what we've heard, the house mother living in a completely enclosed unit below and have residents living in a completely separated unit that you have to go outside and enter. And so my only point is this property has a zoning right to have up to 10 people, but the current configuration of the property is a single-family residence, and they'd like to maintain that internal access.
What would be the maximum number of people that could, if we went with your recommendation, that could occupy that home under that R5M?
Well, R5M technically allows you to have one unit for 1,500 square feet of lot area. A boarding house, it talks about a unit being a little bit different of a thing because you have multiple people living in, you could have up to 2 people living in each room. So based on the number of off-street parkings they have, they could have up to 5 rooms occupied, so it'd be 10 people.
So that they could have right now currently existing, and without considering the use, there's no need for that change in zoning there.
Well, again, they want to maintain the house as a single.
I thought you said not to consider the use.
Well,
And so if we're just looking at the zoning,
right.
if the requirements would be met by its current zoning, I just don't understand why we're even looking to change something without considering the use. Because the only thing in my mind that's distinguishing the difference is how they are going to actually use the facility
Right.
and the people within. And are we supposed to consider that when we're looking at a zoning change?
My only point in discussing all of that was, I think we were discussing that there could be a limitation based on the fact that this was a single-family residence, and therefore there'd be a limitation on 5 people living there. So in that light, we talk about the use. The property actually has a zoning right that will allow up to 10 people, and so I just discussed it in that context. I think that you should be looking at, is the R5M zoning classification appropriate in this location?
Okay, thanks.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Quinn?
Sorry. Refresh my memory from the public hearing. How many people did the petitioner say were going to live here? Were they proposing 10 or were they proposing
No,
more?
it was less. It was 6 and a house mother, correct? Yes.
6. So they're actually proposing less than what the special use permit's already allowing anyway.
That's correct. It's my understanding there's 6 bedrooms, 3 up, and yep.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Manus?
I must be really dense. I'm having a really hard time understanding this. Are they going to use it as, are they going to have 2 kitchens so it functions as a duplex?
The property's already configured to have 2 kitchens. Essentially, you have a situation where it was almost configured like a duplex, and that they created internal access to both of the units. And so it's my understanding that there's already 2 kitchens. There's 2 separate, 3 bedrooms in the one unit, if you want to call that, and 3 bedrooms in the other. The only thing that makes it not a duplex is there's not the fire code separation between the units.
Okay, I'm just questioning, like Ms. Lammers, why we need a rezoning. Obviously, the zoning that's on there allows a duplex. It allows 10 people.
Right, but they don't want
unrelated.
to maintain the house as a
Okay,
duplex.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's say the house is a duplex, but 10 people. You're saying that 10 people could not reside in it the way it is configured right now? 10 unrelated people could not?
Correct. they have a zoning right to reconfigure it as a two-family home, which would allow the 10 people to live there.
Okay. But it's configured as a two-family home except for some firewall, is that correct?
It's officially designated as a single-family residence. I haven't inspected the property, but it's my understanding that there's an internal access to each unit, therefore it doesn't have the fire separation to make it a two-family home. When that occurred, I'm not quite sure. It was originally permitted, well, it was permitted as a single-family house. The inspector stopped it because it was being constructed as a two-family home and said, you need to go get approval from the Zoning Board of Adjustment to make it a two-family home, and that was done in 1980.
Is there any sort of special use permit that could be granted in the existing zoning district to accommodate the use that this organization wants to put in there?
Not that I'm aware of. No, well, I suppose it could be an institution. Yeah, I suppose. No, I don't think it is. I just read the definition of institution today, and I don't believe that would work. We changed the definition of institution when we were working through the planned institutional district with support services for homeless, and we actually the definition prior to that was much more broad, and it just said means a not-for-profit occupying a building, and you saw a lot of interesting uses occupied buildings, but that definition was amended in 2012.
Because really an existing structure is going to be used here by rezoning, we're opening up future uses more intense than what's being proposed. I'm wondering if this use doesn't work out and they decide to sell the property, is there a way for it to revert back to the present zoning?
I would look to our legal staff. Staff's position is you have commercial zoning on the west side, and the sins of the past, so to speak, have already been introduced to the west side of the street. And so professionally, I would struggle saying that a higher density residential zoning classification isn't appropriate when it's adjacent to a commercial zoning district.
So that was no? Okay.
Yeah.
So we couldn't have something like conditional zoning for this proposed use? Okay. That would be a special use permit that's not offered for this type use.
I think what Brian said, and we would keep that position. You can always downzone you can always come back and rezone the property again. I don't think it's a good practice. We in this biz try to look at the long-term ramifications. So that would be our position. We would not want to do a actual true conditional zoning where if this use didn't proceed, then we could in essence rescind the zoning.
Yeah, and I would also add that with the lot area being 7,841 square feet, if you were going to, let's say, demolish this house and build a multifamily zoning, it's 1 unit per 1,500 square feet of lot area, and so you're essentially talking about five residential units. So I would question if that would be more intense than what the property is configured as. Now, the code does contemplate that rooming houses and boarding houses tend to be less intense because you have 2 people living in 1 room, but I would question the economics of demolishing a single-family residence and constructing a multifamily unit to accommodate 5 units as well as the required parking for that use.
Thanks. I don't have anything else.
Commissioner Lammers?
One more question. suppose that we approve the zoning and they're extremely successful, and I apologize for not knowing my RM5s, R5M. Can they exercise their right to convert that to a duplex without coming to us, or would they have to come to us?
They could do that with or without your approval,
Okay,
right?
With
Because they
or
have a
without.
zoning right now to make it a duplex.
okay. That's what I want to clarify. Thank you.
Commissioner Kelling.
The longer we talk about this, the more confusing it seems.
I knew we were running that risk.
The original petition was to rezone this to CO,
Correct.
and city staff is recommending not CO, but something different. So should we not be voting on the original petition? Simply to say whether we're in favor of CO or not in favor of CO? And then if our verdict is different than what the petitioner was hoping for, should they not come back with a new petition to some other classification?
Well, number one, it's my understanding the petitioner is perfectly okay with the R5M district. The caution with thing I would caution you is voting down a CO and saying you've got to wait a time period before they can resubmit a petition on this property.
Well, I understand that, but that wouldn't take that much time, would it? To resubmit?
It's 6 months or a year? 1 year.
1 year?
Yep.
They would have to wait 1 year to resubmit?
Yes.
If there is already zoning for a duplex use based on the 1980 ZBA decision, what's the necessity of this?
Because the property is configured such that there is internal access between the units. Okay, there's a building code requirement that requires a fire separation between units. And it's my understanding that they would like to maintain those as to maintain internal access between. I think that's how the model of these things work.
But beyond fire separation, for a duplex use, there should be ingress and egress from both units. Right?
Normally, a two-family home would have its own access externally, and that's how the property was originally configured, its own outside entrance and that separation.
All right, thank you, Ryan.
Any additional questions? Roll call, please.
Connell,
Yes.
Hepner,
No.
Kelling,
No.
Lammers,
No.
Manus,
Yes.
Madden,
Yes.
Quinn,
Yes.
Reinhardt,
Yes.
Tallman, yes. The motion carries. And that does conclude the zoning activity report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Tallman. I see we have no subdivision activity. We do have one item of future business for you to take a look at for our next meeting. Communication. Would anybody in the audience like to speak? Seeing none. Any additional business? Appears as though, would staff like to talk about the additional business? It is for our own reading and enjoyment.
Hazard mitigation? Oh, the
Third quarter report.
we weren't prepared to talk about it. We could do a presentation next meeting.
Okay.
It's up to you.
Sure, I'd like to hear about it next meeting.
Okay.
Any additional questions, information?
Move to adjourn.
All in favor of adjournment? Opposed? We are adjourned. Please drive home safely.